Kia ora koutou, Brent Carey, ko toko ingoa. Welcome to our first webinar for today in our Net Safety Week, Diversity Matters Online Safety Done Together. Today is our Senior and Neuro and Linguistically Diverse Day, and it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Hanny to talk to us from Age Concern. She's been at Age Concern since 2013, and she does focus on a topic that's dear to my heart, elder abuse. As a young lawyer, my first job actually was at the family court, and I was a deputy registrar, and I looked after the Protection of Personal Property and Rights Act, and saw a lot of elder abuse issues in my role in relation to property management and welfare. So I feel like it's full circle for me to be listening to this talk today. Obviously, her mahi is inspired by the workers throughout the country supporting older people who experience abuse and their whanau, as well as many Age Concern's superb efforts to enhance the wellbeing of older people. So it's my pleasure to welcome Hanny, and I'll leave it with you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Greetings and welcome to you all. I want to start today by honouring those who have gone before. Tangata whenua and tauiwi, those in our tōpuna who have come from near and from far to this country and who have gone before us. Remembering them influences our perceptions of ageing, and that's what I'm talking about today, is about ageing safely. I first want to start though about the theme for Net Safety Week. I know that you've seen it some places already, but this theme is titled Diversity Matters, Online Safety Done Together. And that's a great theme for this week. You'll be able to see that, like you've already seen earlier on in the week, you've seen that there's a whole merging of colours that are intermingling. They're not uniform like on a grey grid. They're intermingled and they're different colours. You can see the colours are intermingling and they're not all in a little separate boxes, completely separate from one another. Well, that's the same what we say as ageing is about. Older people don't fit neatly into boxes. And so everybody intermingles. And so when we're considering online safety, what we need to consider is how diverse older people are. If on this picture, instead of what's there, you saw an old woman with a little knot on top, bent over with a walking stick, you'd say, oh, that's what older people look like. But in fact, in this slide, what you are seeing is a whole lot of different people. And what we're trying to tell you is that, in fact, any of these people could be older people, but they're like anybody else, not necessarily distinguishable in the population. Even though, in fact, there's quite a number of older people in our population, almost 500,000 in the last census. What's significant for today's talk with these older people is that none of them went to school with computers or cell phones. But what it means is that the older generation learned to add up, do arithmetic in their heads. And when you went to a shop, they would give you their change without resorting to any kind of equipment. They could just give you change in pounds, which was 20 shillings, and pennies, which were 12 pennies to a shilling. And the other remarkable thing about this generation is they could actually find their way around the city without having a phone in their hand with the Google on it. In fact, older people have seen more technological change in their lifetime than the younger generations who have always had computers and phones with them. As we look at this, it's not only the 500,000 that were there at the last census. In fact, older people are a growing part of the population. So when we think of the projections of what's happening, what we're really saying is that we can't ignore the fact that older people are online, more older people are going to be online, and that online safety remains an issue. The important thing to reiterate is that older people aren't homogenous. They're as diverse as those colours that mingle into one another. And in fact, not even their age cutoff is the thing that draws them together, because we know that in many of the physical aging morbidity statistics, what you see is that aging amongst different population groups, like amongst Māori and Pacific Islander, that the physical aging differs. And in some sets of statistics, it can be as young as 55. But there's other important things to consider about when we think about older people, is that when we think about older people who are not born in New Zealand, if they're older people from the Pacific Islands, more than 50% of them have actually lived in this country for 40 years. And likewise with British and European older people who are living here but weren't born here, more than 70% of them have lived here for more than 40 years. Likewise, many of the older people who identify as rainbow have lived here all their life, but many of them were not able to come out until it stopped being illegal. What we've found is that for most of older people, even though they've worked through some of those prejudices, like racism, like homophobia, even though they've worked through those earlier on in their lives, when it comes to being older people, often they have to work through those prejudices again. So where is it that it's come from that there are rights for older people? Unfortunately, we don't have yet, even though a lot of self-advocate groups have been fighting for it, we don't as yet have a convention for the rights of older people at an international level. But what the United Nations did agree to in 1991 was a set of 18 principles. And this one here is the 17th principle, and that's the one that most aligns to the issues that we're talking about today in terms of the ability to live free from exploitation and abuse. So that's why, in the next slide, we're going to look more at elder abuse. As Brent already said in the introduction, it's certainly an overview that feeds in very well to what is the issues of online safety. What I'm showing you in the next slide is that, in this slide, is that there was an attempt at an international level to come up with a definition. It's never been enshrined in law as one particular law, but it is used internationally, and we use it in New Zealand too. And the reason for that is that it gives a good depiction of the particular issues that are involved in what elder abuse is. And it is a single or repeated act, and usually it's more often than once, where an action or a lack of action, and I want to point that out, that often it's the lack of action that we also look at when we're looking at abuse issues, and certainly that applies online as well. It's also that it's occurring within a relationship where there's an expectation of trust, and this is often where we get confronted in online issues with older people, is that they've got a reasonable expectation that when they're connecting with an organisation or a person online, often it's already been someone that they've connected with, or an organisation or a firm that they've connected with face-to-face in the past, but now have to do it online, and that there's a reasonable expectation that they can trust that what they're interacting with is that person or that organisation, which is where, again, online safety becomes a huge issue. And the other one on the right-hand side is that causing harm or distress. And this is part of the problem that often we come across, is that recognising the harm or distress happens later, the third one that's on your screen, which is the institutional abuse. And you may be surprised about this because that's not something that people generally think about when they think about elder abuse, but it's actually the policies and practices of companies that we have to look at when we're looking at what type of abuse is actually happening. A really good example of that is what's happened in the pandemic. In the pandemic, businesses used the changes that happened in the pandemic to force bills to be sent by email, to increase charges if they were still willing to send out invoices by post, but often making that no longer possible and making it only possible to pay online and withdrawing any face-to-face options. What's important to recognise in this instance is that the elder abuse that happened and still happens as a result of these changes have been at the financial cost of the older victims rather than any cost to the business themselves. I've given you a range of common behaviours that we recognise as part of what happens in elder abuse. However, they're in alphabetical order for no other reason than none of them are more important than the others. I'd like to just give you some scenarios about how we see the methods of the abuse tactics that happen online against older people. One is to make the deal look so attractive, but to make it so time limited that people don't have a chance to think about it. So it's really appealing to people being made special, to people's greed that they can get a bargain, but also what it does is to hook people in by making it so time limited that they're actually enforcing control and raising fear of people. The second line's slightly different. That's a more authoritative approach where they're looking very official, like they are a bank, a government department, and they're investigating a breach of security. So they're coming across as they're expecting compliance because they are the authority. A third way is more about ingratiating empathy, understanding, being very supportive, matching feelings. Look, I know what it's like. I lost my wife too. I do know what it's like for you. So they're trying to be supportive and share equally. A fourth method that's used is much more around needing you to be involved, needing your advice, needing your support, but needing your altruistic approach. Like, of course you don't want that relative overseas to not get the operation because there isn't enough money. Of course you want to help those poor children who have to go to school in the winter without shoes, as long as you do those things. We see all of those different tactics quite often. Next slide, please. Regardless of whatever tactics are used, and regardless of however we're approached, there are times when all of us, regardless of our age, can be more prone to be taken in. There's times when we are more sensitive. There's times when we seem more open to considering other options because of what's happening for us at the moment doesn't feel so good. Unfortunately, these are also the times when we do need the support of people who can be there for us if we do click on something that's not quite right, or if we've done something without thinking because of the space we've been in. And then the question becomes, how do we ask whether we've done it wrong? How do we know what to do? Who do we ask? And who do we ask that's not going to laugh at us or tell us off? So we've come up with this short phrase to try and help all of us to consider what to do. The first thing that we want people to do when they come up against anything that they're not even sure about is to stop. So what we're saying is, stop, Turn off your device, hang up, whatever it does, don't carry on the interaction. Go and do something else. Turn up your music, go for a walk, start cleaning, do the vacuuming, whatever it is to change tactic, but don't keep engaged in whatever's going on. Because often it's the urgency of the situation that tricks us to thinking we have to make a decision straight away, when that's really not what it's about. Some of you may remember David Lange when he was Prime Minister making a famous statement when he was discussing about huge changes in the New Zealand economy, that he was saying to the country, stop, we're stopping for a cup of tea. So what we're suggesting is that if it's okay for a Prime Minister to say stop, we're stopping for a cup of tea, it's okay for any of us to say stop, go and do something else. Don't keep interacting with something that we're not sure about. Once we've stopped, what we're suggesting is that it's really important to take a break from engaging from it. So the suggestion is sleep on it. And this especially applies to those of us who know that we are inclined to get hooked into bargains. Those of us who are bored easily and want a new idea. Those of us who are quite impulsive. If we know that we're inclined to any of those kinds of interactions that make us jump to a conclusion very quickly, is that we're inclined to get sucked into something. The reality is that all businesses, even legitimate businesses, are trying to get us to be their customers, and they're trying to keep us as their customers, and they're doing that online. But when they get us hooked as customers, they want to keep us on like we're an addict, and they want to appeal to our addictive natures to keep going on. And that's exactly the line that what abusers do online. So when we suggest wait, sleep on it, what we're suggesting is that you go through some of these questions to yourself. Actually ask yourself how it is that you've got to this point and what it is that you can stop yourself from being hooked in or addicted. So we've covered stop and wait, and now we're on to the third one, which is validate. And this is really the time when we take a critical approach to what's being offered or suggested. We suggest this is the time when all your best research skills come out, and take the time to do it so that you compare what's offered, compare what other companies are offering in the same line, or compare about the type of services that's being offered, whether it's from an individual or whether it's from a company or whether it's from something that seems legitimate from something that you've known before. First thing to find out is it valid? Is it legit? Be very skeptical. This is when all your suspicions have to really rise to the top, and you have to be extremely critical. Another thing that you can do in this validate phase is to check it out with people who you know have got different opinions from you. So rather than going to the person that you always go to this Boxing Day sales with because they're in for a bargain, because they're likely to think the same as you, but go to people whose opinions you know are different from you. Another option is to go to groups that you normally are part of anyway, whether you're down at the golf club, when you're on the marae, when you're at your church fellowship group during the week, or anywhere where you might meet other people in a group setting. Raise these kinds of issues and what you've come across, because often it's when you raise things that other people come back and say, oh yeah, I had that too. And usually there's someone who says, oh yeah, that happened to me and I know, don't go there, so that we can get advice from each other around these kinds of things. Because what you can bet your bottom dollar is you're not the only one who's been sent this kind of information or this kind of offer. That's why we're so in favour of what the Net Safety Week theme is, and it includes this online safety, because we want to suggest that we are all in this together. which is why we're on to the next slide, where we're offering proactive safety. I need to preface this by saying is that despite what you may have heard, older people do want to be involved in the world. Older people do want to run and organise their own money, even if it means that they have to do it online. Older people do want to connect with relatives, even if that means that they have to learn how to see a photo online of someone that they've been close to all their life but no longer can see because they live too far away. Or they want to be able to open that video of a grandchild who's taken their first wobbly steps. So whatever we do, part of being proactively safe online and encouraging older people to do that too is to encourage them that this is a realistic way of connecting. But what we say first is that older people have lived not in a world of online connectivity, and they've lived very safely. They've learned. Older people have never left their passports or their bank statements or their life insurance policies sitting on the front doorstep, open to view of the public. Older people have always had systems of keeping their documents safe and keeping paper copies of everything that they've needed secure. They've known how to do this. So what we're suggesting is that older people need support to do the same for their online documentation and for their online relationships. We've suggested some things in this slide, but we know that in webinars coming up that there will be more that points to those specific issues. But all those general information around keeping our passwords, keeping our PIN numbers, not paying anybody unless we've initiated the contact, all those things are the kinds of things that we need to keep on repeating and helping each other organise in a safe way. What we're also doing is we're encouraging each other how to be safe. And I'm appealing to any of you who have already had experience or are considering having experience of supporting someone, whether they're older or not, who is learning about online safety. And can I plead with you to please don't get into that negative framework of scorning or teasing or making jokes when they don't get it right the first time or they don't remember what you've told them last week. If you think about it another way, when a child comes home from school with their reader because they have to practice reading it to an adult, and they get to the third page and they stumble on a word or don't get the word right, we don't yell out to the child, "What a stupid kid you are. The teacher's told you what that word means. You've said that one before. Why don't you just say it?" We don't talk like that. We encourage them as they're learning. So I just want you to stop and take note and think. Have you ever said to an older person when they've asked you a question about something to do with online, "I've told you that before," or "You should have noticed that the URL was dodgy," or "Why can't you see that that email address is spelt wrong? There's no E in it. Yes, I know the logo looks like it's your bank, but that's not." Or, "Oh, look, I haven't got time to come and fix your computer again." Think of the times that you've required patience from someone else when they're learning. Or otherwise, if you're a quick learner and you've never had to ask somebody twice or ask for repeated help from everything, try and imagine what it would be like when you've lived your life, you've been successful in your work and got to an older age group, and then a grandchild comes back to you and says, you know nothing because of something that you've done wrong in their eyes. We want to thank you for everybody who's already been involved in this webinar series, all the people who've presented. But also we want to say thank you to anybody who does feel that they've got a question or does feel that they want to know something else. What we do at Age Concern is that we offer a 0800 number whereby people can ring us if they want to talk something through when they suspect something's wrong, and people don't have to identify themselves, especially if they're embarrassed about maybe that they've clicked on the wrong thing and maybe they've now answered a question that they're not sure was the right question to be answering to someone that they actually really don't know. We'd rather people ring us and talk to us, and we can put people through to the appropriate agencies. What we're saying is that we're all part of different communities, as older people, as people from many diverse communities, but we do want to be positively supporting each other. We want to be part of together supporting the online safety of older people. Unfortunately, I can get into the chat, but I can't get into the Q&A.
Okay, cool.
If you read it out to me, I'm certainly happy to respond.
Okay, sweet. So the first one is from Lance. Age is just one descriptor of an individual.
We agree with that, and certainly when it comes to issues of online safety, age is only one descriptor, and we are certainly all part of a range of diverse groups, whatever age we are.
Thank you. And the second one from Lance, you were talking earlier about how the banks and other businesses are reducing the options that are available to people
Sure.
and making it only online options, or creating a financial burden for offline options, if you like. Lance just says, don't forget the banks stopping the use of checks.
That was certainly part of it. And from our point of view, from elder abuse, one of the reasons why we see that in terms of elder abuse is it's made older people more dependent on other people to support them in this, certainly in this stage of getting to know how to do things online, or for those who are not able to use online. And there is a section of older people, but also a section of younger people and people with disabilities who are not able for various reasons to use online. And that makes people more vulnerable because they have to rely on somebody else to help them. And it's that whole question in terms of elder abuse is finding people who are trustworthy, who are there for your needs and are not going to abuse that trust by taking things for themselves or diminishing your ability to look after your own needs.
Indeed. And the next one from Lance. These are standard scammer methods, but knowing older people are more likely to trust and not understand what is happening while not wanting to be seen as stupid. Add this to not wanting to be rude or not wanting to miss out or be seen as too different or lacking in understanding, combined with loneliness, and you have a big problem. Real businesses use the same methods to convince you to spend money.
Exactly. Lance has summed it up very well. It's exactly what we were talking about. It's those combination of factors that people, in principle, and older people, the older generation, grew up in an era where you could trust the doctor, where you didn't question the teacher, because those were people who were trustworthy, and you trusted that if you deposit money into your bank account at the bank or at the post office, then that was trustworthy business. So when you're now getting online emails, and you don't have to be old to get emails from a range of banks. I certainly do. I get emails from a range of banks. Some of them I've never had anything to do with, but I still get them. So it's that whole expectation of trust that really sits in there. And so it is a very lethal combination in that online world, which is why we're really pushing that when anybody asks about support around online issues, that people of who are more familiar are very patient and encouraging rather than scorning and discouraging, because that's going to put anybody off asking again.
And Lance says, a while ago, I helped a random older lady at the supermarket that was being scammed to realise and deal with it.
Fantastic. Lance, you're a champion. We need more people like you. And that's why this whole Net Safety Week theme of online safety done together speaks so much to the work that Age Concern does, because we can't do it on our own. What we need is a supportive community that supports one another. And that's what's really important about this work. And that's why I think what Net Safety Week is all about is so important. We're all here to learn and help each other. And if we can be patient and be supportive, then we can pick up on where people are being abused, whether they're older or not, and so that we can support them into more safe operation together.
Thank you, Lance. One of the other attendees says that senior nets throughout the country are there to help older adults with technology.
Exactly. And senior net often run courses. Courses are often being run by other groups as well. Senior net does them, and they're a great organisation because often they're older people supporting older people and teaching older people. One of the things that we've learned in the way that we learn new material, it's not that older people can't learn, and that's sometimes the perception from younger generations, is older people certainly can learn, but may need to use additional tools. So for example, may need to write down so that the next time when they have to do that particular action, they may need to look up their notes that they took the first time. It doesn't mean they can't do it, but they just need to find a way of being able to do it that makes sense to them. And places like SeniorNet are great because they do understand those needs for different kinds of learning.
Thanks for that. And a question from Alexandria. Given the complexity of online scams, what is the best way to support my elder neighbour when helping her with these issues?
The best way is to make sure that she feels comfortable to call you at any time to check things out, or that you have an arrangement by which you say, where you agree that she only opens things or doesn't open things unless she knows that you're available. So have some kind of a pact that says, no, I won't open anything unless it's X, Y, and Z. Because what you're trying to do is to make sure that she feels, that your neighbour feels that she can trust you to give her the right answer, even though you might not be available at the time. Because if she's online at a time when you're out or busy or doing something else, then she might feel, oh no, I can't wait till she comes home, or oh, I only see her once a week, so I can't ask her in between. So have some kind of a contract between you that she can delay, and that's where the stop, wait, validate may be a good option to teach her to say whatever she does, don't open anything or don't react at all until you have a chance to see her. And if you get to see her once a week or twice a week or whatever, that she saves up anything that looks dodgy. I guess making people suspicious of anything that's not known is a very important way of encouraging people not to go into a space that's dangerous.
Got a comment from Sarah. It says most libraries are also providing classes for older people.
Thank you for feeding that through, Sarah. I agree that there's often in communities, there's different places, and sometimes CABs are attached to libraries, and a CAB is always a good place to ask if you're not sure. Some banks offer some support too, or have offered classes at times. So there's a range of ways in local communities. So it's always good to check out where there might be classes, SeniorNet, libraries, CABs, age concerns, senior spaces for older people. Those are the kinds of places that you can ask, even if they're not being run by that agency. Often that agency will know where to ask or where to go.
Thank you. Alexandria responded with saying thank you for your suggestion, and she has already got that contract in place. So thank you. And a comment from Joanna, here in Waimakariri, we've had feedback that SeniorNet are not very patient and don't go back to a very basic introductory level for beginners. Our SeniorNet has now closed. We run classes in our libraries and offer one-on-one support too.
Fantastic. Look, isn't that great? This is the kind of online safety together that really love to hear about it. In different communities, it will be different organisations. And so thank you for that feedback. But isn't it great that in a community there where one option's closed, another option's seen ways of doing that. So thank you to that library, and thank you to you and Waimakariri. And we hope that across the country in a range of communities that's possible. Just because you mentioned Waimakariri, well, that's one of the issues that we do have, and that we do need to keep emphasising, that not all old people live in cities or live close to libraries, that we have people in rural sectors who don't have that kind of accessibility. And sometimes the only way that older people can get support is through a phone line, through someone that they trust, a known person, a relative. So just make sure that when you're thinking about older people that you know about, or older people that used to be people that were part of your life, or relatives who are living in other places, or relatives who are living rurally, it's always a good idea just to check out what do they have in the way of support if the Wi-Fi goes down, or if they're not that accessible, or they've had to change to mobile phone. We've had a lot of talk recently about the copper wire being taken out, and it's meant that people have to use mobile phone options, and that's not always easy for older people. So in that sense, I'm appealing to all of us who are around on this webinar and on other webinars this week, that not only just consider what difference it might make in your work or in your neighbourhood, but also consider other people who are in more isolated places, or who are more isolated because of their social situation, that even giving them a ring after this webinar and saying, is there anything about online that is a worry for you? Is there any way that we could help or set up some safety? We can all be in this together and keep supporting each other. It's a little bit like when the pandemic first started, and we had people like the Prime Minister and Ashley telling us to check on our neighbours, or to ring our older people in our lives. I think this is an ongoing issue around online safety, that it's something that we can keep checking in with older people, and maybe being a bit more proactive and asking them if there's any way that we can help, rather than waiting for them to feel guilty and embarrassed enough to contact us.
Thank you, Hanny. There's no more open questions, so I'll just give everyone just a moment to ask any outstanding questions. No, it looks like you've answered them all. Thank you so much. And thank you for the framework you've given us around stop, wait, and validate. I think that's really helpful. So I'll hand back over to you, Hanny, to just close it off.
Appreciate all of you who are on today. Sorry that we had to do it in a slightly different way, but glad that you've got the messages, and really appreciate being part of this. And I know that the next webinars coming up will be very informative, and I really look forward to being part of those for the rest of the day too. Thank you very much. And as we say, we're doing online safety together for older people and for everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ka kite.